Okay, good morning. I wish we were meeting in person. It'd be easier to kind of get a gauge of what everybody's interest is, what your background is, and that helps me to kind of gauge where to go with this. But in the meantime, I'm not going to focus on milk cows so much as a dairy aspect, more about that setting up the a co-op and how that works. So about 8 years ago, I had recalled the conversation I had with a fellow colleague in medical school about having a dairy cow for our kids to work and to learn responsibility, caring for one. And so that kind of started me thinking. I thought that would be a good idea to have a dairy cow, but as most people know, you got to be milking. You have to milk the cow twice a day, 7 days a week, and that's prohibits any family vacations or a lot of other things. So it created a problem that I couldn't take that on by myself. So I started talking to neighbors and friends that we thought would be interested in doing something like this. And what I want to share with you is kind of how we formed the organization, how it's worked, and what has been good for the operation. So if you have questions about milking, we can get to those at the end and the co-op, and I'll provide my information to, you can reach back out if you want to ask more. So let me get through here. I've got, this poll is stuck on my thing here. 1 second, I figured, there we go. Okay. So as I mentioned, a cow is milked twice a day, 7 days a week. And that creates 14 shares. In a co-op setting, the way that we look at that is each share is this very specific day and time. So when somebody buys in, they don't just buy into the organization, they buy a specific day and time that they come and milk. And so that was the first thing that we recognized we had to establish. The next benefit of a co-op is that the expenses are split equally. So each share has 1/14 of the cost to pay for the annual fees that come up. So in my case, we have 13 families in our organization. I own 2 shares, so I'm paying 1/7 of the annual dues. Everybody else is covering 1/14. That makes it financially viable also. The next thing we established was a schedule. We knew that we needed to have something uniform and a time that would be not really interrupt our days too much. So we established 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And it has to be on a 12-hour schedule. Otherwise, you don't get fair production. If someone comes at 6 in the morning, the next guy comes at 8 at night, he just got 14 hours of production. The guy that follows him might show up at 6 o'clock and he only got 10 hours of milk production. So we're not really Nazi about the time, but we explain that to everyone so that they understand that you're taking from someone else if you come too late. So we typically are people there between 6:45 and 7:30 to do their milking. So establish a schedule, and that's something you'll work out with the people that join the co-op if you proceed and do this. A lead person, you've got to have somebody that's the leader, that's looking out for all the day-to-day things. And that doesn't mean that you're down there doing things every day, but there's little decisions that come up or little things that need to be handled, making the vet appointment, this type of thing. So I assume that's probably going to be the person who initiates the co-op, but there needs to be somebody who's lead. The next thing we did was we established some standards and procedures. Everyone kind of had their input, had things to say about it. And we established a protocol, and then we all lived by that. And then the next thing we have is meetings. So at least annually, but hopefully semi-annually, we're getting together and discussing the procedures going back after the past, what's happened, or what's going forward in the future. It might be things discussing what you're going to do with the next calf that's going to be born, what breed to breed your cow with, different things. And we have fun when we do it. We've grown to the point now that I don't personally know everybody in the co-op. And so all I know them is Tuesday morning or Wednesday night. So when we get together, our name tags, that's what we have them write on there, is what their name, but then what their milking time is. So you get to know who's coming before and after you. So that's some of the organizational aspects that we have for the co-op. It's real important that you establish those rules and standards. And I'll get to this in a second, but it has to be simple. It has to be uniform, and everybody needs to know what that is. If you're going to be successful in this, there's got to be a standard throughout. So establish that early on, put it in writing, make a video of it, whatever it is, explain your processes, your standards, and your expectations. And I don't know if your English teacher was like mine, but she preached this KISS method, and keep it simple, stupid. And I've learned that through this process, that if it's simple, people can do it and they'll stick with it. If you get too complicated or too rigid, then you're going to have problems. You're going to lose interest, or it just runs into problems. So keep it as simple as possible. In our case, the procedures are simple and easy and reproducible, and it takes very little time. From the time I open the gate to drive onto the farm to when I am finished and I close the gate leaving, about 35 to 40 minutes. I might hang around sometimes and do a little more chores, but if I just need to get in and out, that's all it's costing me time-wise. So it's not a big time commitment. And because it's easy, people stick with it. It doesn't interfere too much, and it's not complicated. Here's a picture of my wife, cow in place and the milk bucket hooked up. So as you consider how you're going to do this, just keep simplicity at the top of your mind. With that, you might consider putting in a contract. We originally thought about that. We had an attorney in our organizing group, and we talked about getting a contract. We never did. Part of the reason why we haven't had to do that is because we found like-minded people, and I'll talk about that in a minute also. So depending on your scenario and your situation, you may consider having a contract that people sign, explain their obligations and expectations. Buy-in, this is probably the crux of the whole operation. You have to have a buy-in, and I don't mean verbal, I mean financial. It can't be circumvented. You can't have somebody who says, well, I need to get out of the co-op, and I'm just going to pass my share on to my brother or my neighbor. It cannot work that way. You have to buy in. If there's not a final financial connection to it, you have the risk of running into problems, and a pretty good risk, I think. No sharing of shares. So this is something that we ran into kind of back end, discovered that there was a family who decided they didn't need as much milk as they were getting every week. And so they thought they'd share the milking responsibilities with one of their friends whom we didn't know. And that person had not had official training with us, didn't know our expectations, things like this. And what ended up happening is they forgot whose week it was to milk. And so no one showed up to milk the cow. No one showed up to feed and water the cows. And that puts everybody at risk. So if they're in all the way. There's no sharing of shares. Again, and a share is a specific day and time of the week, and they show up every day that and time of their own share. But of course, being in a co-op situation, that's not so bad, because if you can't make it for whatever reason, you just ask somebody else in the co-op and say, hey, could somebody fill in for me? We use WhatsApp app, and that's our form of communication. And it's a couple of times a week, somebody might say, hey, we got vacation coming up or a work meeting, I can't make it. Can somebody trade? And so we'll do the swapping and passing of information through that medium. And everybody's on the same page at that point. When it comes to finding your co-op members, you'll probably recruit your first group. But as those people get out and you need to find more people, you're best to find people with a personal referral. In the beginning, that's all we would take, are people that somebody in the co-op already knew. We're a little less tight on that now, but I've just learned over time how to kind of gauge who would be a good member of the co-op or not. So personal referrals are really good. It's your best insurance to keeping things in order and keep unity within the group. And then strict, yeah, flexible. I've kind of hinted at that, in our original group, we had an attorney, we had doctor, engineer, lots of different professionals, people that you wouldn't think would be out working on a farm, and they never had. And so this system, when set up correctly and with flexibility and easy, anybody can do this, but recognize that they're not used to being a farmer. And so there's going to be times you'll need to gently explain why we do things a certain way. But make sure that everybody's at least trying to keep up with the standards, because that keeps the risk away and or minimized, and everybody can have a safe experience with the co-op. So if you want to do this, if you don't have a farm and have a cow, what are the things you need? Obviously, you need a cow. And I'll address this a little further in the coming slide, but I recommend a brown Swiss. And I'll tell you why coming up. Location, obviously you need to find a place where you can house your cow and store your feed. And probably just as important as the location, where it is central to where people live, you need to have a barn. You have to have some kind of indoor facility to bring the cow in to do your milking. No one wants to be out in the rain or the heat or the wind or the snow trying to milk a cow. So you need to have a protected area that you can bring the cow in, shut the door, and keep some of the dirt out. So find a pasture or whatever, a neighbor, and have make sure you can put a small shed on there. It doesn't need to be big. 10 by 10 would probably work, but something a little bit larger would be better, because you've got to have a kitchen in there, hopefully, to clean your equipment. I guess you could take it home, but we build a kitchen in, and it's just a sink and a counter, so that we can clean our equipment and leave it for the next family that comes in 12 hours later. Hay, we buy a year supply at a time. The best hay is what's called first cut hay. That's the first hay cutting of the season in the spring. That's the most nutritious, the best, it's got the most leaf, most protein. And so if you can find a source of dairy quality hay, you just don't want grass hay or any old hay. Whatever your cow eats, you're going to taste it. On that side, don't bring scraps and fruit and other things, or don't feed your cows weeds, because you'll taste it. So find a supply of hay that you can get good dairy quality and get first cut. And we buy a year at a time. That way we have the same hay throughout the year, and it's not going to change taste. It's not going to change, cause issues with the cow as you switch feed. Sometimes they can have issues. Milking equipment, we decided right off that we needed to have an automatic milker. I didn't want there to be any confusion or problems for the cow having 50 different hands in their milking the cow. So we bought a milker that also simplified the process, makes it fast and easy, and it makes it complete. Somebody's hand milking, maybe they don't have the muscle strength to do it. They're not going to clean the cow out. And now you're putting her utter health at risk. And then corn, cows have to have corn that gives a fat and a energy supply. So somewhere you've got to have access to get some corn. We've used mostly rolled corn. Currently we have ground corn. We have a feedlot near our place, and we just buy from them. They buy it in bulk, and then we buy it by weight from them. And we have a 50-gallon drum that we keep it stored in, just fill it up when we run out. And then, of course, power. Something's got to run your milking equipment, something to turn the lights on. In the beginning, when we started, we only had a generator. We were just out in the middle of this farm, and there was no power. And so we had to use a generator, and that had problems. Sometimes some cold mornings, it wouldn't start, or we had to remember to bring fuel, these types of things. So once we got a little more established, we brought power in. And so that's been great, because now we have hot water. Previously, we'd had to bring a 5-gallon bucket of hot water with us every morning when we came to milk. And so there's just some conveniences with having power. And of course, water source. You need to have good culinary water to wash the dishes and to water the cows. So our costs, our first year, we had an initial 6 members that started, and we were about $7,000 in our operating cost to get started. That bought our cow, supply of hay, some equipment, and the building out of the barn. So it'll vary on what you do, but it was at least $7,000 for us to get started. So that's probably the high end that you could expect, unless you have to do land lease or something. And we don't. I spend a lot of time helping the farmer that we're on his property. If he's out of town or needs help, then I come and I do that. That comes back to having a good lead person, and so that pays our rent, so to speak. Anyway, so $7,000 with our initial operating. And here's where I want to talk about the buy-in. For us in the beginning, our buy-in was about $1,000. So that's how we got in. Subsequent people that came in, we only charged $500. As someone got out, we'd find someone new to come in. And I think that this is absolutely required to have a significant dollar amount that weeds out the less enthused people. If you're going to put up $500, I think you're pretty committed. So you could discuss that within your own group, but this is what we do. Now, if you already had an operation kind of going and had a lot of the things covered, you still would charge the $500, in my opinion, and you'd bankroll that money in an account that you could use for future expenses. If you have extra left over, great. But something that you can agree on with within your group, what's a number that people will have to pay to get in. And the way we handle that, well, let me cover the next line here. So on average, we spend about $300 to $350 per share per year. So that's buying our year supply of corn, our vet bills, our hay bill, our hay supply, just the different things that come up in the year. I kind of figure out what our electrical bill is, what our water is going to be. I know how much it is to AI the cow per session. Sometimes it takes 2 rounds to do that, but okay. So anyway, the way we work this is if people get out of the co-op, they can get their $500 back if they find someone to replace them. The new person would give them the $500, plus they would also cover a prorated amount of the year's annual share. So if somebody came in 6 months through the year, they would get they had to pay $500 of buy-in, plus a prorated amount of what we charge that year for the expenses. Here's some of the milking equipment things you need to have. The picture on the right there is a supply that you can get, a little kit from PhramD Dairy Supply. I can't say enough about this company, PhramDDairySupply.com. You got to have a strainer, a transport bucket. Make sure you have one that has a sealable, tight lid, and some of those other things. And that's general equipment you need to get in. So getting started, first things, you got to find like-minded people. Get as many as you can that helps share the burden of the workload and the expenses. Do that first. Once you have the people, then you can worry about the other things. Find the location, got to have enough space, shelter, water, power, and of course, find a dairy cow. KSL, you'll find them on KSL often. And you can also go to dairies and get some of their stock that they're turning over. They only keep them a couple of lactation periods, and then they're moving off with newer cattle. This is where I want to talk briefly about the brown Swiss. If you had a Jersey or a Guernsey or one of these smaller breeds that is producing 1 gallon to maybe 3 gallons per milking, that's not going to be enough milk for most people in their daily use, or their weekly use rather. So if you had the smaller cow like that, you're going to have to own multiple shares to be able to get enough milk to make it through the week. The brown Swiss is very gentle. It's a good-natured cow. It's a very healthy cow, and we get 5 to 6 gallons per milking, and that's enough for almost every family to get through the week and help them. You know, it gives the milk for your cereals and drinking, make your yogurt, your butter, your cheeses, whatever you want to do with the milk. So there's the first things getting started. Cleanliness is really important. You can see our kitchen set up here, just got a sink and a water heater. And we, when we're done, we come in, and I won't get into how we do it, but you can see on the slide there, you do a cold water rinse. That's how you eliminate the milk stone. It's kind of like your hard water stain on your kitchen sink. If you use hot water to rinse your milking equipment, you will get milkstone, and then it's hard to get off. So cold water rinse to begin with. And then we use a hot soapy bleach solution and then a hot water rinse. In the 8 years and 100 families that have been involved with this co-op, we've never run into a day that somebody got sick from the milk. So don't worry about the raw milk issues. That's a lot of hype from the FDA. Just some other photos here. Here's our barn that the room that our cow comes into. You can see the pump on the right-hand side there. Our dishes being washed, the cow hooked up to the milking equipment. The other thing that we do is we record the amount of weight of milk, including the weight of the bucket. I didn't want to get math calculation problems. So you can see a scale in the one picture. We weigh the milk in the bucket and record that on the calendar. So we get a feel for what the production has been the last week or so. This also helps gauge whether the cow has come down with an illness or something. Her production will drop off. I've only seen that happen with our cows maybe 3 times in 8 years, but it's a good gauge to see how you're doing. And then we keep the calendars year to year to see how she's improved from a young cow to a more mature cow and an aging cow. And then question